I'm going to share some things that will help you understand what I think about what's going on with me. You'll find some writings of mine in the web. What happened to President Kennedy, which bear an uncanny similarity in that we were both derided by people who assassinated, or in my case, tortured us as being liberals. Now, notice that as Kennedy's limousine came into Dealey Plaza, there's a man standing under an umbrella and another man with his fist in the air. This was never investigated by the U.S. government. The man standing closest to the president when the first shot rang out was the man standing under the umbrella on this sweltering hot, bright, sunny day in Texas. Now, I've never been satisfied that the gunshot came from the grassy knoll because the angle seems much more acute. And what we see, of course, from the front, it didn't come from the book depository. Whatever Lee Harvey Oswald was, he was used. But as you see, a motorcycle cop who was present went over to the curb where he thought the problem originated, parked his bike, made sure that it was parked properly, and then cast a very nasty look into the sewage system, into the sewer grate, which was in perfectly positioned to fire that blind shot. And you can see men can easily crawl through that space. They can easily get out. And those two men went and sat down next to each other. And one pulled out a walkie-talkie. You can see the antenna sticking out from behind his head. There's a lot more that has never been investigated by the U.S. government, who participated in perpetuating the greatest fake news situation in history, the Warren Commission. And interestingly enough, I didn't get on this case by way of the Kennedy assassination. I got on this case by way, first of all, being tortured with a nerve agent. Second of all, being used for an AIDS testing guinea pig on Mount Desert Island. And last but not least, seeing the people who claim to be concerned with AIDS victims bitterly protecting the people who were behind what happened to me, as though I didn't matter at all. In other words, they were protecting the people who quite obviously released the AIDS virus. Now, why would they do that? Part of it was trickery. They wanted to trick the victims. And I'll explain to you how they went about it. And I'll show you some things that you've probably never seen before. This is the map of Dealey Plaza. We now know, of course, that there was an attempt to make sure that the motorcade went to the Trade Mart rather than the Women's Center. There was a big fight about it because they wanted to make sure that it got onto the street that was the tragic theater of what happened. That summer, some friends of Lee Marvin made a movie in Japan that also had that scenario of rerouting onto the street that was desired. And if you look at the killers made by Lee Marvin with Reagan that summer, you see a very interesting repetition of the plan to reroute the motorcade to get them onto the street that was convenient for the crime that they were committing. Clips from the movie The Killers, as it was called, can be found in my website, storychecksout.org. She says, "We're waiting for you." And one of the most interesting things in the clips is that they time it to 6 seconds. He sees the sign and waits, just as what occurred in Dealey Plaza when they got to the sign. They brought the limousine to a halt and waited. Now, what this means is that Reagan was involved in the murder of John Fitzgerald Kennedy. And of course, I was tortured. My family has been threatened. My death advocate, I can't hear my own voice, was attacked and raped. There was a guy who made a movie called The Birth of the Nation at the Dawn of Hollywood. They invented the Burning Cross. The Burning Cross was adopted by the KKK. They went on to make Reagan's wartime movie. Now notice that this Lazarus has the U.S. over the swastika. And you may think I'm reading into that, but you don't see this in the movie. This isn't Photoshop. I stopped the film for frame-by-frame analysis. And what we see here is the U.S. over the swastika and Reagan right next to the swastika. You see this rather us business. Lazarus back from the dead, desperate journey, goes back to a wartime plan to help Hitler escape, get to Argentina, and then strike back against liberals. And of course, the women in this semiotic, which includes Fluxus and Yoko Ono, are Japanese allies of Axis Cinema in Hollywood that Reagan developed with. They're holding their ears because Kennedy, they justified killing him on the grounds that he was, the leader of the country who committed the so-called war crime of dropping an atom bomb in Hiroshima. And these people did release the AIDS virus. It was called Operation Little Girl, in contrast to Operation Little Boy, which was the atom bomb. You can see the symbol of the rerouted motorcade here, and her holding her hands over her ears again. Now, we know that this is Fluxus planning in semiotics, in part because the disappearance of famous people and the cerebral consciousness that was at work in this plan came in part from Ayn Rand and her influence on Hollywood. And she had a notion of helping very important and prominent people disappear. The script, the Texas school book that they planted on my house, was something that contained information about the film's style and the semiotics of the plan. And it was sent to me by a girl with a spitting image of the woman in, her name was Gayle Burston, Gayle Caroline Burston. And of course it says it would be like starting over, which was the last song that Lennon printed on Double Fantasy when they used to double, and he was evacuated to his safe place. Reagan also had me in D.C. the day he claims he was shot. He waved to me the night before. This was Pentagon Disney. They were getting an ironclad alibi. If you look at the Odessa file with John Voight, what you see is, the Kennedy assassination starts coming over the radio. And, the credits are rolling. And the name Oswald slowly morphs into the name Ronald. Of course, this is just taunting by the assassin faction. But they taunt in such a way that the message also comes out. The script correlates the shooting of Martin Luther King to Dee Dee's birthday by a factor of 6 years and calls attention to coincidences. This gang gassed me in a place called King's Estate. Gay L. Burston was from the Holocaust survivor community. What are they doing gassing a little boy? My father was chair of philosophy of education at the University of Pittsburgh. Pitt. CMU doesn't stand for Church Military Union to anybody but them. Pitt doesn't stand for the pit of hell to anybody but them. And he was on Bush's ship in the Navy. He was in the radio room, a charismatic, nice American dude, okay, who they did away with. And C was his initial. And they I might add, castrated me among the horrible things that they've done. Now, they made me deaf, and this is the symbol of the Neva Corporation. Neva is a giant Japanese pornography company. Dee Dee seduced me. Her sister's name was Neva Mancine, like Manson, or Cinema of Man. These were brutal pedophiles using a chloroform genre, kidnapping of a child who they struck blindside. It was like being shot. Obscene, Mancine. Neva was her sister's name, and they gassed me in a place called King's Estate. The Germans used to call the ramp to the Xylon B gas chamber that they said was a bath by the name of Himmelschweg, which meant road to the heavenly estate. You can see one of Neva's subsidiaries is VNR Planning, which very clearly stands for Victory and Revenge Planning. Now, this business about double fantasy goes back to the Oswald Diary. Some of the keys to the semiotics come from Life magazine in 1964. Semiotic theory wasn't really well understood in academics in those days, but it was very clearly understood by the people who put together, they invented the Burning Cross. They put together the cinema system that these people were involved with, you know, back when before war even broke out. Now, they used me for an AIDS testing guinea pig on Mount Desert Island to show that I was unfit, they said, to be a father. They've declared, the morning after 9/11, they declared that I was, you know, an empty set, and if I tried to have a wife, they would kill the children in my family and inject me with HIV. They actually said that in print. And these people come from John Lennon's Two Virgins cult. It was a Two Virgins pussy ball game. What was remarkable about Dee Dee was that she had already lost her virginity, but she had a trump. She was a little younger than me, okay? She was one of these people who was heavily involved with NAMBLA child trafficking, and they took me hostage as a child and used me very piteously, which gave Reagan the position to basically blackmail me when I was still only semi-conscious of what happened. You see, and one of the reasons I was only semi-conscious was because I had an impacted nerve injury that nobody knew about. Of course, these people were very, very violent. I mean, we know they slashed or rippered somebody outside the clubhouse. They blew up the World Trade Center, and they bragged about it in their cinema. You know, they're not, you know, hiding what they did. They're just making it so that people will sort of like, you know, well, excuse it. Okay, and one of the ways they excuse it is by saying that I was lusting after a virgin. Okay, because I had, they correlated the shooting of Martin Luther King. The Klan, there's a book about them called The Mask of Chivalry. And they say that they were protecting virgins from the ravenous black man, you know. Well, the nerve agent hurt so much that when one of their agents, Leslie, was the Gay and Les Alliance, when she broke up with me, I was in tears. She left me unrequited, so there was a virginity dialogue in the drama department who were, milking my brains for, the purpose of stagecraft in the matter. And, John Lennon then disappeared, and Yoko Ono was in a position to get into my house through 20th Century Fox because of a stand-in step-family and get hold of this script that had been sent to me when I was tortured as a child and was in my basement. I didn't know what it was. She just seemed to be some Jewish girl occupied with me. Gayil's script then goes into the hands of the people who did it, and they cry, Allah Akbar, because Crary could have saved John Lennon, who was fake news anyway. And he was with the people framing Ronald Reagan. I'll show you how nobody framed Reagan. But notice the Japan symbol, all in blood red crimson, coming up from the vaginal area of the actress in that film. This business of two virgin semiotics permeates the entire craft of this crime plan. Now, notice the man about to drop something in the water. This is a Robert Fripp record, and it has a spitting image of Gail Burston on the cover again. Now, Fripp, everybody liked him in The Gang That Tortured Me. The man screaming with his ear being ripped out of his head. They used to write and laugh about how they used that as their leitmotif. I hitchhiked all the way from Pittsburgh to St. Louis after I graduated from high school, just barely, because I was so deaf, just to hear him play. I'm deaf. I can't hear anybody play. And he backstabbed me like no tomorrow, okay? It was something that you could never believe. They had my girlfriend raped. I mean, it was just a nightmare. It was an absolute nightmare. And they tried to stage it. They tried to broadcast using the very Fluxus system that was at work in places like Guardian Unlimited to make it look like that, Lennon died. That's the important thing. And they said, okay, they sent me a letter saying that if Hero had met Archimedes, there wouldn't have been a population explosion. Well, what are you saying? Martha Gellhorn told me the British were largely unaffected and unconcerned about AIDS. Again, what are you saying? They're saying you don't care is what they're saying. That's what they're saying. They're saying they are going to lie through the teeth about the whole thing for the money. That's all. They don't care about anything. They don't care who knows. They don't care who gets hurt. Because the only thing that matters was John Lennon. That's the only thing that matters to them. And they'll never care that they lied. They'll never care about any of it. They're certainly not going to care about the man who called himself Camelot, because they're waiting for the rise of their own king. And then we'll see who's big, they think, They told me these guys from Warrendale. There was a guy named Dale Abel, so Warren killed Abel. You get it. I mean, it's that kind of system. Newcastle, King's Estate, that sort of crap. Now these two Oswald IDs, the JFK assassination people won't admit what happened, okay? But if you look very closely at this, you'll see that it's a fake ID with Oswald's picture was in his wallet or something. They planted on whatever. It traces to 63, and the letters ID are darker, leaving HELL, and it has the initials of Adolf Hitler. If you think that's not funny, take a look at this one. 7th of December is the anniversary of Pearl Harbor. If you look at my Social Security card, which I was signed up for by this gang, it begins with 1984. So what gives with this stuff? What gets with this stuff is that Hitler was in Argentina, and he was working with Reagan's Hollywood. This was Pentagon Disney at their most dismal. Now, in order to continue this story, I have to find a couple of things. If you're interested, you might want to give me a moment to pull together a few things that continue to identify for you what is going on in this hellacious process of Hollywood's overthrow of our news. Okay? Because that's what's happening. It's fake news from Hollywood. I had a letter that was unopened by this woman that I opened in front of witnesses after I knew they were involved in the AIDS attack. And it says this is mascara or black blood. They demand that I go, this from the doorman at the Dakota. They demand that I go there to apologize to Yoko Ono. That's pretty big. And the U.S. Navy allowed Yoko Ono to force somebody who was tortured as a child to be forced to apologize for the war at sea. I didn't want to. They tortured me. And I found a couple of things in some of their letters, you know, about how they were going to go about, you know, making sure that I conformed the plan. Only 2 people would know, she says. Okay, only 2 people would know. Reagan waves to me the night before he claims he's planning the attack. I mean, you know, after he claims that he was shot, I should say. And, you know, the Mount Desert Island, I'm unfit because I was making love to somebody. It's a question of character, you see. And if you go down to Mercy Hospital and CCAC where I go to school, they all stood by and let this be done to me. But Henry Wade, Marilyn Monroe, you know, Kennedy's half a man, so cut Monroe in half and you have Roe versus Henry Wade, the sheriff who framed Oswald. And right here is proof of the nerve agent that they gave me, that you can see in my face. My body was retching out inside of me. And, you know, they gassed me in a place called King's Estate. You can lie detector this because I'm on film. What started the whole thing for me was surrounding my name with positive and negative signs. This guy was talking about a scheme to transform the human race by injecting the blood before AIDS started, and he organized this attack. And what you find, quite interestingly, is that black culture went along with it. They really did. Black culture went along with it because they had me as the devil saying things that I had overheard when I was tortured as a child. Okay, and they were like, oh, well, we can blackmail the white suck. And they came up with this concept that's called a compensatory codex. Okay, and what that means is that they can abuse you and poisoned me in the heart, they poisoned me in the stomach, and this wasn't black people I'm talking about, but black people went along with it. Okay, and because they said that I had crossed the race line in a romantic relationship, and, you know, so basically Kennedy was just a white who was compensatory coded, you know. Wow, man,